Welcome back, folks, to the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Call. Today, we'd like to take a look at metabolic issues in late gestation. It's a very timely subject, I think, for this time of the year. I know for myself here at LC Ranch, we are just getting into lambing, and I know there's a lot of other sheep and goat producers out there that are either at the beginning of their lambing season or about to get into it. And I think looking at these issues like milk fever and ketosis, pregnancy toxemia, it's very pertinent. So we brought Barbie Casey on from Small Ruminant Consulting, and we're going to take a look at those issues. And also Barbie has some exciting new products she'd like to tell us about that actually target some of these very problems. So welcome back to the call again, Barbie. Thanks for taking the time to come on the call with us and share on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. So in sheep and goats, we tend to see several issues. By metabolic issues, we're really meaning something that is nutritionally related, but also just the function of their body. So in late gestation, we often see two things, ketosis and milk fever. Now, a veterinarian may give you a different analysis of this. I'm going to give you my nutritionist view. So ketosis is a lack of energy, basically. And some folks may refer to it as pregnancy toxemia. In my book, it doesn't hit pregnancy toxemia until we start losing babies. And you're definitely going to know when that happens. You're going to see, the dam is really not going to be functioning well, and those babies are going to be dead and be causing a smelly discharge, and it's really hard to miss at that point. So what I want to talk to you a little more about is when it hits those first stages called ketosis. And ketosis is a late gestation, often, sometimes early lactation, but most likely in late gestation. It's a metabolic disorder where we see just a lack of energy. Now, the crazy part is this can happen in both thin ewes and does and fat ones. So I'll get into that in a moment, but some symptoms that you might see would be maybe they're just not coming up to the feed bunk. They're not being aggressive at eating like they were before. They might be standing back away from the herd or flock and just standing away. Now, we know that they sometimes do that before they're getting ready to have their babies as well. So just keep note of those things. Now, if we start to see some stiff or slow movement, if you've ever seen like a dog or a puppy the first time they hit snow and they want to step in there, but they're really not sure, and they move kind of funny like and moving those legs around a little differently, that's what I mean by a slow or stiff movement. The other thing is an acetone smelling breath. That is key. Now, I'll be honest, I've seen quite a few ewes and does with ketosis, and you may or may not get that. It depends on how far into ketosis they are. And so, I think the other thing is we might be looking at another issue compounding the ketosis. So we don't always get that acetone smelling breath, but that is a key. If you smell acetone, basically it's fingernail polish remover smelling, then you've got ketosis. It's time to treat for it. If they're unable to stand, certainly we've got to get an issue that needs to be treated. And then again, if they are too far along in ketosis, maybe you didn't catch it right away, and they've got a dark, smelly discharge, we know it's time to save the babies, or it's too late to save the babies. It's time to save the dam, because we've got a pregnancy toxemia issue at that point. Now, the challenge becomes Ketosis in sheep and goats is sometimes difficult to distinguish between that and milk fever. Milk fever is an imbalance of minerals, specifically your calcium, magnesium channels there, and the balance of that with your phosphorus and your potassium. So that gets really technical. But basically, you're going to see similar symptoms to this. You might often see some just shakiness. Maybe they tremble when they get up, or well, I would say the same things as ketosis, but also that trembling or shakiness is the most common that you're likely going to see. Now, the ketosis and milk fever, you're going to see both of those in the last few weeks of gestation. You may also see those in the first few weeks of lactation if you don't have things balanced as well. But most often we see those in the last couple of weeks of gestation. Now, if you know that, let's say you used AI and you know exactly the date they're supposed to lamb or kid, and you're seeing these issues a month out, we need to definitely look more closely at nutrition, because you shouldn't be having those issues that far away. Now, the crazy thing is ketosis can be caused from multiple things. Either the mom is too thin and she just doesn't have enough energy, or she's got multiple babies that are just demanding so much from her. It's kind of similar to like a low blood glucose level. And she's just pulling those reserves, and she just doesn't have enough to feed those babies. And maybe we aren't supplementing her enough with high energy feeds. And the other thing is, here's the crazy part, fat females can also get ketosis. It sounds counterintuitive because they're fat. Why don't they have enough energy to feed these babies? Well, it turns out they just can't convert that fat off their back fast enough into a glucose product that then the babies can feed off of. So it really just puts her body into overload, and we treat them the same way. So that's the great part. But we definitely want to focus on prevention.
Sure. I'd like to comment on the skinny ewes. Where I especially see that happen is when guys realize in like mid-gestation or after breeding that their ewes are too skinny. So then they overfeed them in mid-gestation, trying to put weight on them, which doesn't really work. It goes into the lambs and it gives you bigger lambs. So now you get into late gestation, you have a skinny ewe with big lambs, and you're just set up for disaster. Although I would rather have that than a fat ewe still. you still, I think, have more options with that skinny ewe of feeding her some extra energy than those fat ewes are just a problem all around.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I agree with that. And that's where prevention is key. So first of all, we need to be doing some body condition scoring. And, it's difficult for me to get that across on a podcast, but what I like to say is, if you hold your fist up and you run your finger across your knuckles, that is too thin for a ewe in late gestation, for sure. Okay. If she's there at late lactation, after those babies have really taken everything off of her, that's the skinniest I want her to be. And so if you were to take your hand and make a fist and just rub your fingers across the top of your hand there where it's nice and smooth, that's where I want the top of her, spine to feel like around mid-gestation, at least. There's time, the time that we really want to get those gals ramped up on feed is after we dry them off and then before they hit breeding season. But we don't want them fat, right?
Right.
So we want to get them back in condition slowly over time. And that's easy to do. Most of the time across the U.S., we can do that on grass, just based on our seasons. And if you have a facility that you're not grazing, you can typically do that over several months with a low input of grain.
And their needs are so small over that time. If you look at it from a nutrition standpoint, like the nutrition needs for a lactating ewe or even for a late gestating ewe is, I mean, just roughly speaking, almost twice what a ewe in maintenance is. So you can see it's very easy to get that ewe where she should be gaining weight in when she's just in maintenance. She's not bred, she's not lactating. So yeah.
Absolutely. And like Matt mentioned, the key is we don't want to have to push them a lot in mid-gestation so that we create big babies. We want to have that ewe or that doe in good condition. We want to be able to flush her, right? To get more eggs pushed. And a fat animal, you can't flush. So there's some goals we need to work towards in terms of body condition score throughout the year, so that we can flush and get more eggs dropped from that ewe or that doe, but also just keep feeding steady amounts. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand drought situations. I've been through them myself. So if we are shorting those females in early gestation, it's not as big of a deal. We can make up for that in mid-gestation, okay? But we don't want to have to push it so much that we're creating large babies.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into all of that today, but just feed accordingly, And the other thing is we need balanced nutrition, especially when we're talking preventing milk fever issues. I personally, I don't have as much grass as I would like to, and I am lambing now in January and February. So I feed a grass mix hay, typically grasses, through mid-gestation. And then late gestation, about 2 weeks before they lamb, I take them off of their unlimited hay source, and 2 to 3 weeks before. And I put them on a mixed hay. It's a grass alfalfa mix. So I've increased their plain nutrition that last 3 weeks by changing my hay. I'm changing it to a more highly digestible product. So they've got room for the extra babies, as opposed to using like a first cutting hay that's really bulky. And they've got more calcium content in there as well. So I'm trying to prevent the milk fever. Now, something I also suggest is ultrasounding for the number of babies you have and feeding accordingly. If you can group your ewes or does based on how many babies they've got, great. I don't have that capability just based on size of my operation and space. But because of that, then I will feed for twins and triplets. I won't feed for singles on everything. But one thing you should be doing is feeding your yearlings or your first-time mamas that are still growing separately from those mature animals, because you've got some bullying that goes on. So we've got that chain of command at the bunk, no matter how much space you have. Now, if you're using the lovely universal feeders, you won't have to worry about that as much. But your females that are still growing typically need more than your mature animals. So in trying to prevent ketosis issues and still keep mama growing with those babies, we should be feeding those gals separately and a little better nutrition.
And that's where ultrasounding for the number of lambs born would be super helpful, because that's something we don't ultrasound for number of lambs born. Probably will in the future. At this time, it's just not quite practical. But on those replacement ewes, that would be really helpful, because we're breeding those ewes to lamb at a year old. And if what her needs are, if she has a single compared to what her needs are if she has a twin, is a lot different. So we're usually kind of underfeeding our ewes that have twins and overfeeding the ewes that have singles. But we're trying to hit that balance, because if you overfeed those ewes with singles, you get too big of a lamb, and then you have more birthing issues and just all that fun. So like there's a very thin line there, to try and balance that with those first time ewes.
And if not to get in the weeds too much on that subject, but that ewe lamb with twins, so she's probably 12, 13 months old, 14 months old, making sure she has what she needs can really help set her up for success next lambing.
Yeah.
If she gets pulled down too much.
Absolutely. There's data and research out there stating that if you don't develop those mammary glands in the first lactation, they're not going to continue to perform well in second, third, fourth lactation. And by that, I mean the next few years or the next few lambings or kiddings. So it's important to make sure she's developing well. We're feeding her enough and not shorting her, because she's going to feed those babies before she feeds herself.
Yeah. I agree. That's a huge thing, and especially for smaller flocks. They typically don't want to keep their ewe lambs separate and feed them extra, but it's because it is a pain. But it's pretty critical in my opinion.
And I'll be honest, I am a small farm myself. I only have 20 ewes, but I will tell you, sometimes that's the challenge. Having a smaller farm is not having the capacity and the scale to be able to move things around like I want it to. But I will say where I have improved my flock the most is by grouping those ewes separately, just for feeding purposes. And honestly, guys, that's where your economics are. If 70% or more of your input cost is nutrition, that's where you can really maximize what your savings are, your cost savings, by grouping those. And one of those things, if you can't ultrasound, maybe you don't have someone locally that can do it, or timing just doesn't work out, it really doesn't take that much time. But if you learn how to blood test, you can draw blood yourself. I draw blood myself. You do not need to be a veterinarian to do it. And you have the right tubes, you can test those ewes and send off the blood, and within a few days know whether they're bred or not bred. Yep. Now, that in itself is going to give you a lot of cost savings, because then you can toss those ewes or does that are not bred either back in with the rams or the bucks, or ship them, or whatever you decide to do with them. Maybe you want to hang on to them for another cycle, but you can feed them separately and not feed them like the other females that are eventually in late gestation. And then you're guessing, is she going to lamb? Is she not? So there's a lot of cost savings there too.
Yeah, I agree. We're probably getting off topic what we wanted to talk about, but I did have a question on if your user's skinny going into breeding, skinnier than you would like, but you're flushing them. I'm this is talking if I'm in confinement where I have full control of the feed. My approach has kind of been to just leave those ewes on that flushing program for longer till I get the body condition on them that I'd like. And then in mid-gestation, we can back off and feed them more of a balanced diet so that we're making sure we're not getting those lambs too big. Do you have an issue with that at all? I know you had said, you can also, if you're in like a drought situation, you can maybe underfeed them at breeding or maintain condition at breeding and then later on catch up a little bit.
No, I agree. I think you can continue feeding that flushing diet. The key is that 45-day mark is so 45 days after conception is when that embryo really holds tight inside the uterus. And so the least number of changes we can make between the date they're bred and 45 days after they're bred, that's what we want.
Okay.
It's crazy, but when you change their diet, that's causing stress on them. No matter how you're changing it, a little changes, and we may already be changing it with the pasture growth, right? So it's really hard to do, and we can't control the weather, but we can control nutrition.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah.
So in saying that, we're saying that flushing ration that we're feeding prior to turning the rams out should be held pretty steady to that 45-day mark.
Yes.
Yep. I don't think you can do that though. That's too long on that flushing ration. Especially if you consider you have a 30-day breeding window. So those last ewes are breeding 30 days later. So if you want to protect all your females, if you want to wait 45 days from when you pull the ram, now you're looking at 75 days. But even if we just go 45 days from when we put the ram in, that's a long time to have them on that flushing ration.
So changing that, let's say, Matt, so let's say you did not keep it to 70 days, just 45 days from when you turn the ram in. Probably, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Barbie, but if you make that change gradually, don't say, okay, they're getting a pound of grain or whatever, and don't change it cold turkey. If you would ease it back off, that would be pretty safe, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. The slower you make those changes, the better. And, your flushing diet may look very different from my flushing diet, from my neighbor's flushing diet. Some folks, their flushing diet is putting them on a different pasture.
Sure.
So, it really does change a lot there. But one thing I would like to come back around to is when we change our forages, just make sure that when you're in late gestation, that last month, at minimum, the last 2 to 3 weeks, you need to limit your hay a little more so that you don't have prolapsing issues. But when I say limit hay, I'm not saying feed the same first or second cutting hay that you have in smaller amounts. I'm saying either increase the quality of your hay there or supplement with some additional grain so they do get that extra nutrition along with it. We just don't want all that extra bulk because we've got more than one baby most likely in there. And mama's not going to have enough room for that. So you may see prolapsing issues in late gestation if you have too much bulk. Yep. So if you do have those prolapsing issues, that's where it's time to cut back on the hay a little bit, give her a better quality hay if you can. She still needs hay, okay? She's still a ruminant or grass, but she's going to need more grain to make up for that, likely. And that's why I always start increasing my grain the last 3 weeks. Yeah. Okay. And then once she lambs, give her all the good quality forage you can get her. Yeah. So, back to milk fever and ketosis. Matt and Leon, you can help me with this. An ounce of prevention is worth what?
A pound of
cure.
There we go. So, so think about your nutritional costs. I'm going to use just because that's what I'm used to here. But let's say you got an expensive grain mix and you need to feed 2 pounds of grain, which is a lot, but for the last 45 days. Let's say that is 50 cents per head per day, costs you $22.50 a year. That's a decent amount. I understand that. Bear with me here. So let's say she gets ketosis and you don't know if she's got milk fever or not. And guys, in cattle, we can tell the difference between milk fever and ketosis based on their symptoms. But in sheep and goats, we just can't always tell. And so it's smart to treat for both. And you'll see them bounce back quicker because if they have one, they likely have a subclinical case or a minor case of the other. So if we've treated with propylene glycol for ketosis, and we found a cattle version of CMPK that we've used part of, then she loses milk because of the issues she's having. We have to give her a probiotic because we've thrown her gut off from the 100 milliliters of liquids we're giving her every 6 to 10 hours. And then we give her dexamethasone because she needs a steroid to get her going. We've put no less than $30 into her. And we still have the potential of losing the lambs and her. Mm-hmm. So we can put $22.50 in nutrition into her and prevent it. Or we can spend over $30 and still potentially lose the ewe or her lambs or both. So again, prevention is key, and really working on that body condition score and making sure we get them right is key. Now, we may have some folks here listening that have show animals. And guys, I'm one of those folks too. We all like our females fat in the show ring. And it's a problem when it comes to production. Please stay tuned and keep your eyes and ears out for a product coming called Evo Tonic. You will be very interested in that, and it will be focused on helping those fat females get through gestation and lactation, produce more milk, get better immune systems for mom and babies, but also get them through that late gestation without running into ketosis, even though they are fat. So that's coming. Little teaser there for all of you. So let's talk now, though, about treatment of milk fever and ketosis. So most commonly, now remember, I am not a vet. I am a nutritionist, and your vet may have a different opinion of this. this is what's worked for me. And in my nutritionist mind, this is what works. So you can do one of two things. You can give propylene glycol about 60 cc's, depending on the size of your female. That's, I would say your 100 to 250 pound female, about 60 cc's of propylene glycol is going to be a good enough dose. And then find a CMPK source. Usually they're labeled for cattle, and give them about a quarter to a fifth of the dose of cattle. Now, you're likely going to have to repeat that. You're probably going to have to give some probiotics. Depending on how far along she is, you might ask your vet if you need some dexamethasone. Problem with that is it's going to dry her up. So she's not going to milk well. So that's kind of last resort. But if she's off feed and not eating, and you're trying to save her and the babies too, that might help get her back on feed.
Wouldn't dexamethasone potentially make her induce lambing as well? Because I know you can use it to induce lambing.
Yes.
So you have to be careful with that.
You do, but here's the thing. If you are 2 weeks away from lambing or kidding, and you induce her, that's really a premature birth, but they are likely developed enough that they can handle it. That
might actually be a good, it might actually be a good strategy. If it's a ewe that's in pretty bad condition already, if we can get those lambs out, we have much better chance of saving her and the lambs.
Exactly. It really depends on how far you are. And guys, that's based on 30 plus years of experience and working with my veterinarians and many others. You really have to do what you think's going to work on your farm and what your veterinarian recommends. The great news is we have some new things that have just come to the market in the last week that are showing spectacular results. So I partnered with Evolution Show Feeds of Bellstra Milling in Indiana, and they are helping me to make and distribute several products actually, but this one specifically is called Evo 911. Now, the 911 should give you enough clue there that it's used in emergency situations. And so this product is a paste. It is designed to give 2 doses if needed. But guys, it's working so well, most people only have to give 1 dose. And it is essentially your ketosis and milk fever treatment in 1 punch of 50 mils. So it's a paste. You just give them the 50 mils orally. And if you need to give a second dose in 8 or so hours, go for it. It's not going to hurt them. But it's a lot less liquid. It's got some goodies in there to help keep their gut going and enhance that. Some vitamin B to help boost their appetite. Some immune system boosters, along with all the wonderful things that are needed to treat for ketosis and milk fever both into one.
So with treating for milk fever, calcium deficiency, you would just use that product, and how soon would you see a response? Because I'm used to using injectable calcium glutamate, and you see a response pretty quick. Depends how you administer it.
Yeah, so I will tell you, not many folks do the injectable calcium because it's fairly dangerous.
Sure.
It's got to be given very, very slowly, and it's got to be given intravenously, and that scares a lot of folks. Mm-hmm. So this is more of a convenience thing. It's going to take a couple hours to take effect.
Yeah.
So I would not treat them 3 hours later for a second time if you're using this product. Remember, we're treating ketosis and milk fever in one using this. The calcium injection is only treating calcium. The other thing that's interesting is when you say that, what most folks don't know is when you get milk fever, sometimes it's not just a calcium imbalance, which is why we have the CMPK products. That stands for calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and potassium. So when those 4 minerals are off balance, we get milk fever. Often it's a calcium magnesium deficiency. So if the calcium injections or intravenous works for you, great.
Yeah. I was just asking because, I mean, it seems like a really good solution. I was just curious on how fast it works. And we've actually, just a couple podcasts ago, we were talking about this issue, and I know I had said that, well, my way of knowing what it is give them some calcium. If it don't respond to that, it's probably ketosis. And I also said on that podcast that I haven't seen it for a while. Well, I've treated like 4 years for it in the last week here. So yeah, it is definitely something you see. So no, this sounds like a great product. I'm very interested in it. Where do we find it? I was looking on your website here, and I didn't see it on there.
I found it. I had a look.
Or maybe I just didn't find it yet on the website.
It is literally just came out last week. We're just launching it. So you will see more info coming. If you have my Facebook page on Small Ruminant Consulting, certainly that's your best place to get the most up-to-date information on these. But Belstra Milling and Evolution Show Feeds, they are the distributors of these products. And you can call up John. John is the sales manager there, and he will get you taken care of if you'd like to order some. I can give you his phone number here. It is 219-869-4810. Or you can email him at John, JOHN, V as in Victor, at belstramilling.com. And soon we'll have a Shopify account that you can go through and just order it off of that. But for now, John or myself are your best bet. You can always give me a call. My number is 513-205-7992. We can get you hooked up with it. And like I said, check my Facebook page and our website. We'll have updates coming more and more as we get further along in launching these products.
So I have a question on using it for ketosis. My take would be with ketosis, the main thing you need is energy. So obviously, if we're running into ketosis issues, we'll be adjusting their diet to help accommodate that. But I guess I'm curious how this product is helping us with the ketosis part. Is it just that it's helping boost their stomach?
You see the screen I'm sharing, Matt.
I am looking at that, yeah.
So if you look at the ingredients list there,
it does have a high fat content.
Because so the number one ingredient is propylene glycol.
Yeah, oh, gotcha.
Okay, yeah. So that's the first ingredient, and that's the kicker for ketosis. Yeah. Now it is a smaller dose, and I'm well aware of that it's a smaller dose than what you would typically give to treat ketosis, and that's because we've got some other goodies in there to treat for ketosis. So we were able to lower the dosage rate. And then we've got some things in there to help with absorption of those and to maximize the performance of it.
Like, yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely looks like a good product, and I'll have to get some and give it a try.
Yeah, I'm anxious too to have it on hand, and if I had some of this in the last probably 6 weeks, I've had how many calls come in with late gestation problems.
Yeah, and it's a problem. I mean, like I said, I've been had to treat some here in the last week, and it was one of those deals where I knew I was maybe setting myself up a little bit, but it wasn't convenient to do it a different way. Well, yes, it was. So these were ewes that were going to be lambing in another week. So they were about 2 weeks out from lambing when I started running into issues. And just a week prior to that, we still had them out grazing small grain fields. And I would have liked to be bringing them home maybe a little quicker than that, but we wanted to finish up the field where we were at. It was on a buddy's farm. So we just had them out there grazing those small grain fields. We did have protein tubs in with them just to give them a little bit extra. And I also knew, I mean, they seemed to be fine on energy, but I knew, we're pushing it a little bit. It's cold. We're getting down there on grazing. But I also knew we're likely starting to look at some calcium deficiencies, just without testing, just knowing that, small grain's not that high in calcium. Anyway, what we did, we brought him home, which is stress. And that's also often is where you'll set off something like milk fever, is when you bring them home like that and stress them. But we didn't have any issues there. We brought them home and we put them on an alfalfa grass hay, and they were doing fine. But then about a week later, the bale they were on ran out, and I was going to be moving them into the lambing barn the next day, or 2 days later, I think, and putting them on TMR. So instead of putting the same alfalfa grass hay in, I just filled the feeder with some grass hay. It was what I had. It was a little more convenient. The alfalfa grass was in a big round bale. This was just in a square bale, so I could dump a part bale in. And that's what set him off. Taking him off that alfalfa grass, which would have had plenty of calcium, and then just putting him on a straight grass. I mean, it was decent hay, but that's what set him off. I mean, I had, I saw one ewe that morning. I treated her, and she was up. But then when I went to move them over to the lambing barn that afternoon, there was 2 ewes that I had to get up and like slowly walk over to the lambing barn. So I had to treat 3 of them, and I mean, they're doing fine now. The one I had to retreat this morning, but it's just interesting how something like that can just kind of set it off. And they were all, ewes that are heavy bred. They're probably carrying multiples, likely triplets. But yeah, it's interesting when you see them kind of when you have a couple like that all in a row, like there was something that triggered it and set them off.
Well, and keep in mind, Matt, we all have these issues, and the world isn't exactly perfect like we want it to be. And you've got a couple things you did there. You moved them.
Yeah.
You changed them from grass to hay.
Yeah.
Then you switched their hay type.
Yep.
And if I'm right, I'm guessing you had a weather change in there too, and it got a little colder.
I can't really say it did. Nothing dramatic anyway. I mean, we brought him from outside, being out in the cold without any shelter, and we put him in the barn where it was warmer. Now, that was about a week prior to having this issue. yeah, I mean, it might have got a little colder or something, but nothing dramatic.
So Matt, I think you did the right thing of treating them with calcium from my perspective, because it sounds like it's not necessarily a ketosis issue, but
Oh,
could you have some underlying subclinical ketosis? Possibly.
sure, sure.
You know, when they change their diet, their dry matter intake changes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to keep in mind. But at the same point, you know, I think it's important to note that we are making changes, and really we're not feeding those ewes or those does. We're really feeding their bugs in the rumen,
Sure.
and those bugs take a couple weeks to really adapt from a wet forage to a dry forage to a grain, which is why we always encourage small changes or changes over time. So
Okay.
while you're stressing her out with those changes, you probably stressed out the bugs in her rumen a little more, and she might have a little bit of a stomach ache slightly along with that. So a little bit of stress there, but nothing that you would really notice likely. So
And
so
that's why I would have
it's just
preferred,
ruminating.
I would have preferred to bring them home maybe 4 weeks prior to lambing and, have those changes start then. But, it's farming, it's life.
That would be a perfect world, right?
So yeah, but yeah, it's one of those things you see like there. I knew what I was doing wasn't ideal. So I wasn't surprised when I saw it. But I just thought that would be interesting to our listeners to kind of show how this can happen. Even in a decent program, it's not always ideal. So,
Well, and speaking of ideal and not ideal, I will get calls many times saying, "Hey, I'm having ketosis issues," or "I'm having, milk fever," or some kind of issues. And in a perfect world, I would have a hay test in front of me that says, "This is what the hay looks like." I know not everybody's going to have that, but I encourage everyone to get your hay tested and at least have an idea of where you are on energy, protein, fat goes into energy, but digestibility. I mean, from a trained eye, I can look at a forage test and say, "Oh, they're not really going to eat all this."
yeah.
I have my hay. I like my hay that I'm feeding my ewes late gestation, but I took a picture 2 days ago of what looks like sticks in their feed bunk that they haven't eaten. I can tell that from my hay test. I know they're not eating that. They're eating the good stuff, but there's not a lot of that. Okay. And so the goal is, you can see on paper what they have, but what they really eat is what the key is.
Sure.
And you may not always see that. So what I like to tell folks is there's what you're feeding them, but I need to know what they're leaving in the bunk. What are they not eating? And that's just as important as what they are eating. Because sometimes we leave that part out.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, very good. Anything else you want to cover yet on ketosis or milk fever?
Just remember that, sheep and goats we're likely treating for both most of the time. Matt has a good case here where I would say he's only treating for milk fevers. But I would say 80% of the time we end up treating for both. And those females, when you do treat for both, will likely recover better and quicker.
Yeah. And I would, even in my case there, although they responded to the calcium, I would guess, like you said, there's also some ketosis issues there, or just if you're throwing her system off balance. If you're throwing it off just based on calcium deficiency, anything else you can do to help boost that rumen and make sure she has enough energy and all that, it's going to be a good thing. So I needed your Eva 911 a week ago, but here we are. I'll see if I can get some shipped to me.
Well, absolutely, we'll hook you up with that. And I'm getting ready to hit the thick of lambing here myself here in the next day or two. So, as a nutritionist, I hope that I won't have those problems. But we all know that nature tries to prove us wrong all the time, and if we've got big growing lambs in there, sometimes mama just can't pull all that energy, and we all end up with those issues. So don't think that you're alone if you run into these issues, because we all have them.
Yep, for sure.
So one more question I had, Barbie, will this be on some store shelves in the next several months?
Yeah, absolutely. The key is asking your local dealers, your local feed dealers, to get some in stock for you. Or you can order it and get it shipped to your house. They're shipped by single tubes. They're shipped by cases of 10. But dealers can certainly get them. There are anyone that gets Belstra milling feeds or Evolution show feeds can already get them. Otherwise, just give John or I a call and we'll make sure that we find a way to get it to you. We're looking actively for distributors so that it's much more available in the coming months. But certainly that takes some time. So we're still working on those distribution channels.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I'll put links to where they can buy it here in the show notes here on the podcast, so people can find it there. So, all right. Hey, thanks again for coming on, Barbie. And it was a very timely discussion, really. I mean, this is something that is hitting the fan right now, so to speak.
Yeah, well, good luck to everybody. I know it's always a challenging but very rewarding season. So,
yeah, we have all the way one lamb on the ground so far. It's a little bit early, but it's I'd say next 10 days, probably they should start.
So we'll all be in the lambing and kidding barns together, and so if I don't answer my phone or answer my texts, bear with me. I'll get back to you. I'm just usually probably covered up with lambs and mamas at that time.
Yeah. I told somebody the other day that I don't know if I'm getting old or what, but this weather coming on, it makes it makes like spring lambings look pretty nice.
I was actually thinking of that too. I can usually do it for a while, like a couple of days isn't bad, but if you got like a week or 2 week stretch of that cold weather in the middle of your lambing season, after a while it just drags.
I mean, lambing jug water buckets, I mean they're freezing from morning till evening. Like, it's just everything's.
That's your next podcast topic. Lambing jug water buckets, keeping them from freezing.
I don't have a good solution for
that. Move south. we don't have too much issues with that. Not like Leon does. I mean, we can freeze, but we can manage it pretty good.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch up with you next time. This episode of the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production podcast is brought to you by Lost Creek Wholesale, your go-to source for high-quality sheep and goat feeding and handling equipment. Lost Creek Wholesale is the U.S. and Canadian distributor of universal feeders, the ultimate solution for saliva lick feeding. Whether you're looking to boost your flock's nutrition or improve your feeding efficiency, universal feeders are designed to make your feeding easier and more efficient. They also offer a full range of top-notch equipment, including hay-saving hay racks, spin-in trims, scales, lambing jugs, alley systems, and sort gates, all designed to help you manage your flock with ease. Visit our website, www.lostcreekwholesalellc.com, to find a dealer near you and discover how Lost Creek Wholesale can help you be successful. Thanks again for listening.